Hi everybody, this is episode 1 of our Beyond the Cloud series, where myself and Rob here discuss all things cloud migration, modernisation for your business. So this first episode, we're going to talk about the goals of migration. Just before we dive into that, I'm the head of partnerships at Codurance, and Rob here is our head of sales. So we speak with lots of customers and partners and people in the industry every day about their kind of business goals and how they're aligning their IT to their business. And so, Rob, let's just dive straight into it then. I guess we hear a lot in the sort of business media right now around sort of a lot of economic uncertainty. Is now really the right time to be thinking about investing, a huge amount in IT, or sort of migrating to the cloud can be a kind of large, scary thing to start to think about. So it'd be really interesting to find out, what kind of conversations you're having with customers in the industry, and what are some of the objectives that they're looking to invest in the cloud right now.
It's a very broad question, and it very much depends on the organization that we're speaking with, because I think what we tend to find is that every organization is looking to move into the cloud for different reasons. There's a lot of the kind of overarching reasons in terms of additional kind of scalability and observability and being able to release quicker and release features quicker. But I think from an actual business perspective, it's always very different. And I think there's a lot of examples within Codurance where we've worked with organizations that have lost the lease to the buildings that they're in, where their data centers are held. So there's a very kind of short timeline and very much of it's an urgency to find somewhere else to house that data center, or how do they make that leap into the cloud? Or all the way to they're looking at taking advantage of some of the cost saving kind of benefits of being in the cloud, whether that's through a funded project or funded package that comes from any of the cloud providers, or again, they're looking at how do they kind of offset some of their own operational costs in terms of buying hardware that's coming up for renewal. There's I think from the conversations that we have, it's really clear to see that organizations are always looking to move to the cloud for a different reason. So I think understanding kind of what that core reason is really sets the tone of why an organization wants to move to the cloud. Is it the right time for them to move to the cloud? But also, what's it going to take based on what their current state looks like and what their infrastructure looks like, not just from a technical perspective, but physical as well, and where it is. What's it going to take to actually put it into the cloud? And the journey to do it as well, because it depends on the organization, the architecture, the infrastructure, the types of technologies they have. Not everything is suited to being in the cloud. There's a lot of kind of legacy applications or systems that generally can't be put into the cloud. So you have to look at how are you going to manage that, whether it's through something like containerization, if you're talking about AWS, EKS, for example, or rebuilding something from scratch. There's a lot of kind of dependencies that need to be looked at and risks that come with a cloud migration that if you don't address them early on, you can really kind of start stumbling as you start moving forwards into a cloud migration. And I think for any organization that is looking to move into the cloud, now especially, given the current economy, doing a kind of a very thorough business case is what we can call it, or discovery at that forefront, to really kind of assess where you currently are in that current state, what the ideal future state will look like. So how do you want your architecture, how do you want your business to look and run in the cloud? Doing a thorough assessment at the beginning to understand if a cloud migration is the right thing for your business, and also how likely is it that you're going to be able to do something successfully for your the whole infrastructure or parts of it.
And how would people go about doing this assessment? Because I guess part of the challenge for a lot of businesses is, they don't know what they don't know. And, they obviously are the experts on their business, but they wouldn't necessarily, know how to ask, what are the right questions to ask? What kinds of things do I need to be actually assessing in that assessment phase? So how can people kind of go ahead and do something like that successfully, so they can, I guess, build that business case to then take to the rest of their sort of senior leadership team, their CFO, to kind of make the case for that change?
Yeah, I think there's a number of reasons. I think from a Codurance perspective, obviously we do we do a number of different workshops and discovery sessions with organizations that are, regardless of where they are, whether they are in kind of the private cloud or in on-premise, to really understand the root cause of what the move is for. I think that's the first thing, is understanding why they want to move. Because that ultimate driver is what's going to then dictate the pace of the migration and ultimately where they should end up, looking at the environment of cloud providers that there are, the bottlenecks that you currently have in your infrastructure and the inefficiencies that you have, and then trying to map out versus what that future state will look like.
Yeah.
How you can mitigate as much of that as possible via a cloud migration.
Yeah, I guess also you can kind of thinking about sort of ROI and, obviously you're saying, saving efficiency and cost and resources and, driving innovation. I guess there's a lot of things that you can measure. So kind of building up that sort of total cost of ownership as part of that assessment, I guess would also help you sort of build that case as well for migration.
I think understanding, you can look as well, if you've got an on-premise setup at the minute, you can understand what your kind of hardware costs are and what your monthly costs of supporting and running that infrastructure is. I think you can do very much the same thing with any of the cloud providers, whether it be AWS, whether it be Azure, for example, understanding what, if you were to do a very basic lift and shift, what would your infrastructure costs be from where they are right now versus in the cloud? And quite often doing a lift and shift is not the ideal route that a lot of organizations want to take, because the idea of moving into the cloud is that you can start adopting some of the services that are available and you can start modernizing your infrastructure and your services. So you can really take advantage of the operational efficiencies that you get and some of the services that are available. But quite often, depending on that kind of first state, there is a need to do a lift and shift. Because again, taking the example at the beginning, an organization that's lost their premises where the data center is kept, you need to just get them hosted somewhere. So they can, from a business continuity perspective, they're able to continue their day-to-day operations. So there is a case kind of for doing that. But I think looking at the ROI between moving into the cloud versus on-premise, there is a case obviously that it will be cheaper to be in the cloud, very slightly, if it's just moving it from one box to another. But when you really start looking at how you modernize your infrastructure, so it becomes that enabler for your business. And I think that's the key thing as well when you're talking about the cloud. A migration is always part of a bigger conversation. It's not a phase, it's not a project, it's a phase of a much larger transformational project. And it's the conversation of how do you ensure that the technology and the systems that your business operate on and rely on in so many senses is constantly adding value and enabling your business to grow. So the business objectives that you have are being enabled by the systems that you work on. And quite often moving them into the cloud with all of the benefits that come from that only enables it further in terms of the scalability and the productivity of the team, in terms of being able to release faster and build out features faster. And again, from a security perspective, there's so many different benefits of having things in the cloud that then enables you to kind of move forwards as a business as well.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I think we're going to wrap up now. So that's hopefully given some food for thought for folks. And we'll be back next week with the next stage of the migration story. So stay tuned. Thanks, Rob.
No worries. Thank you.